Hi, everybody. Tom Lloyd with CCTV out here at the Military Heritage Museum here in Punta Gorda with Dr. Jennifer Zobaline, and we are discussing a very important day. It happens to be VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, which signified the end of World War
Europe. And I think that's an important distinction to make because the war still had yet to be fought in other places, and that was still going to go on for many months. But for people in the United Kingdom, for people in Western Europe, for people in North America, including the United States, May 8th was the day that they had been waiting for. For the United States, for 4 years. For Europe, 6 years.
Oh, wow.
This was a very long time, destruction, suffering, loss, and the war was finally coming to an end.
And talk to me a little bit about just the significance of the day. I mean, you know, people, when they think of it, they know D-Day.
Right.
You
yes.
know, so.
Right, and D-Day marks, in many respects, D-Day is the beginning of the end, although I think folks at the time certainly would not have thought, oh, the war is going to still take another, 8 months, 9 months to conclude. Many people believe that D-Day would be the end, right? That they were delivering this knockout blow, the Germans are on the run. That turns into a much longer fight than I think the Allies anticipated, and certainly the Germans, Hitler was definitely not willing to retreat, to go without a fight, and so that conclusion of the war really does draw out for a much longer period of time, and perhaps that's why when the end does come in May, why on top of everything else, people are so celebratory, right? Because they had been anticipating this, and because D-Day had been this huge event, people thought the end was there, goes on, but then finally by May of 1945, the war comes to an end.
So I'm assuming for historians like yourself and for the veterans too, this was like weight lifted off shoulders.
Yes, I think it's a mixed experience, right? I mean, I think if we look at these images that are playing on the screen behind us, right, we see celebration, we see happiness in these people's faces. And that's certainly the case, right, where soldiers, sailors, Marines, right, are finally told the war is over. You're going to be going home soon. But then I think it's also a reflection, right? It's also a moment of somber reflection of what has this war cost us, not just for the military, right? And I think for people that don't often understand, World War II is really the first full-scale war where civilians are involved on a mass scale, right? And so this was a war that had affected millions of civilians across the globe, not just those in combat.
And you have some statistics because it also affected, well, obviously, soldiers that are from the state of Florida.
Yes. So 16 million Americans served in World War II, so a huge percentage of the population at the time. Interestingly, about 2/3 were drafted, 1/3 volunteered. That number included women as well, and we certainly don't want to forget that. Today, 75 years later, out of those 16 million that served, the United States, we have about 400,000 left with us. And in the state of Florida, we have about 39,000 veterans left. So quite a huge number, and certainly in no large part, right, because of Florida being a destination for that post-World War II generation, men who had served, who had trained in bases across the state, come here after the war, and then retirees later on.
Outstanding. And again, I mean, if you're just joining us, we're talking about VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, the end of World War II. It is the 75th anniversary of VE Day, and Dr. Jennifer Zobaline has been talking about VE Day and its meaning and why we celebrate it, and just the weight that was lifted off of people's shoulders. You brought out an interesting talk. Talk to me about what happened at Trafalgar Square in London.
I was actually just watching this earlier today because there was a lot of news coverage across Europe about the way in which they're commemorating this in light of what's going on around the world with COVID. And so I was reading a story about Queen Elizabeth II, who was a young lady during the war. Her father, George VI, king at the time, and on May 8th, 1945, VE Day, the royal family gathers on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, and of course they're waving and everybody's excited, and Winston Churchill, the prime minister, is up there with them. And Elizabeth and her sister actually leave Buckingham Palace and go out into Trafalgar Square and mingle with the crowd who are celebrating this event. And they are not recognized.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and so here you have the future Queen of England, right, with her sister, out and about with the everyday people. And I think this was a very formative event for her. Here's someone that is going to rule the country, right? This was understood at that time. To really have gone through the war, experienced the war, like many people, right? Buckingham Palace.
Well, she did serve during.
Yes, she serves in the Women's Auxiliary. Buckingham Palace is bombed. Windsor is bombed. Her uncle is killed. The king's brother is killed. So they experienced this war on a way that, for millions of others, and I think that draws them together with the common people. And certainly, I don't think the British people have ever forgotten that 75 years on.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us and
you.
explaining us and talking to us about VE Day. And we would like to thank the Military Heritage Museum for letting us in here to bring you this Facebook Live and the pictures that they have for us for VE Day on this big screen here. And we want to give them a shout out for letting us in their new exhibit, in their new room here, the War Room, which has different topics from D-Day to the Second Battle of the Marne to Battle of Midway and all kinds of things. You can even do a tank battle over here, and they have different patches, and they have all kinds of things going on in this room. And we want to thank them so much for opening their doors and allowing us to come in so we can talk about VE Day. And what a better place to do it at than at the Military Heritage Museum here in Punta Gorda talking about VE Day. But thank you again, Dr. Jennifer Zobaline, for joining us. And thank you, folks, for watching. For CCTV, I'm Tom Lloyd.